in rocks 220 million years old. This deadly design became the prototype for the largest and most terrifying creatures ever to walk the earth. This sprawling 20,000-acre ranch north of Albuquerque, New Mexico, is haunted in more ways than one. Legend has it that at sunset, eerie creatures appear in the sky. Indians feared them and stayed away. Spanish settlers saw them too and christened the area Los Brujos, the Ghost Ranch. Now, these ghosts have been busted, and we know what they are. One of the most vicious predators ever known. Called Coelophysis, at first it seems like an unlikely killer. Only 6 feet long and 3 feet tall, it was small, streamlined, and lightly built. But for sheer terror, pound for pound, it was one of the most innovative creatures of its time. "220 million years ago, during the late Triassic period, life on Earth was undergoing a dramatic change. Bizarre prehistoric reptiles still dominated the land. Brontosaurus, an 8-foot-long amphibian, lurked in streams, snapping up fish with its huge flat head. With long snouts, stout legs, and armor plating, phytosaurs looked almost like modern crocodiles, and the plant-eating Desmatosuchus evolved thick skin to protect itself from attack. Out of an infinite variety of lumbering, cold-blooded reptiles came Coelophysis, with a new twist. The age of the dinosaurs had begun. For paleontologist Bob Barker, it was love at first sight.
I think Coelophysis is incredibly neat because it was a dinosaur that made me fall in love with fossil bones. I saw a display of Coelophysis skeletons, dozens of them, when I was 9 years old in New York, the American Museum, the world's most beautiful dinosaur hall. And beginning the hall, beginning your trek through 160 million years, was this very animal. It was elegant, it was long-legged, it had an intelligent, subtlety to the way it carried its head. It was just gorgeous.
The Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, July 19th, 1947. 3 paleontologists were on a routine field trip. Ned Colbert, George Whitaker of the American Museum of Natural History, and amateur fossil hunter Thomas Girardi were on their way to the petrified forest in Arizona when they decided to stop here, on a whim. Colbert knew about Ghost Ranch. He had seen crocodile fossils from the area and wondered if there might be more, but no one was expecting much. Then, on a slope a half-mile east of the ranch, Whitaker found a small claw. Further up the hill, the team uncovered some unusual bones. It wasn't long before Colbert realized that what they were finding was no crocodile. Colbert had glimpsed bones like these once before. A handful of fragments found in 1876 had been packed away in the American Museum. But the creature they belonged to remained a mystery. Now, here, thousands of bones, hundreds of complete skeletons were lying about. This was a dinosaur graveyard. Unlike reptile bones, these were hollow and lightweight, the hind legs long and lean, and the skull pointed and filled with jagged teeth. Ultimately, they pieced together the first complete coelophysis, a powerful, upright, two-legged dinosaur built for speed. The appearance of coelophysis inaugurated the age of dinosaurs and launched its journey that would end with none other than mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex.
This is the Triassic. This is the dawn of dinosaurs. This is when they make their Darwinian debut. And this is the form they took. They weren't giant monsters. They weren't T-Rex yet. They were the understudies of nature, the small coyote-sized predators.
Word of the discovery spread quickly. Hundreds of coelophysis were big news, but Colbert's problems were bigger. Even with an army of volunteers to dig them out, the work was slow. Once exposed, the skeletons were a jumbled mass of tangled limbs, tightly packed together by solid rock. It soon became clear that they would have to be moved. Divided into blocks 5 feet square and 2 feet deep, an area the size of a basketball court was eventually transported across the country. In all, 24 blocks were shipped to 15 different museums in one of the largest collaborative efforts in the history of American paleontology. The last block wasn't removed until 1986. Even then, tons of fossils were left behind, buried in the hills where they were first discovered. To house them, a museum was eventually built at Ghost Ranch, where today, 50 years later, the painstaking effort to free the dinosaurs is still going on. Using nothing more than a microscope and a dental pick, excavator Alex Downs has been working on this slab for the past 5 years.
The easiest thing to see on the block is probably the right foot of a juvenile coelophysis. This is the second, third, and fourth toe. This is his ankle. The knee has been pulled away here. It's actually the right leg twisted over to the left side. This is the thigh bone, and it goes with this backbone coming toward me with the little ribs.
In this block alone, the number of fossils is astonishing. Bodies are piled upon bodies.
Just in this small area here, we have the remains of at least half a dozen small skeletons and partial skeletons. And if you add in this area, we've got a dozen. So a block this big would have at least 50 animals in it. And there have been a couple of dozen large blocks taken out of the Ghost Ranch quarry. So there must be at least 1,000 or so skeletons in this incredibly rich deposit.
1,000 prehistoric creatures wiped out in an instant. What awesome disaster could have struck? The answer is in the fossils. The skeletons are fairly complete, indicating that they were piled up quickly. The bones are generally unbroken, and the lack of teeth marks indicates no predators had time to feed on them. A tightly closed mouth reveals that rigor mortis had had time to set in. Heads thrown back are the result of neck ligaments contracting as the body began to dry. All the evidence pointed to a single dramatic event. In one catastrophic moment, an entire herd of coelophysis had been swept away and buried alive. After 220 million years, the disaster still haunts Ghost Ranch. Lynette Gillette lives with it every day. A geologist, she's been exploring the landscape, looking for clues to how the dinosaurs died. During the late Triassic, New Mexico was part of a vast arid basin, filled with silt and weathered volcanic ash, creating layers of multicolored sediment. Today, these layers have been eroded away, forming the rocky badlands of Ghost Ranch. By studying the rocks, Gillette has uncovered the first link in a tragic chain of events.
Rocks tell us quite a bit about what happened to coelophysis, and these particular siltstone rocks often have some evidence of drought. This is the mud that the dinosaurs walked around on, and if you look carefully at this particular piece of siltstone, you'll see that it's very cracked. It has little lines, it has bumps and lumps, and it's been drying.
A drought had struck. In a desperate search for water, coelophysis by the hundreds converged on a tiny stream. Then the drought broke. Torrential rains began to fall. Suddenly, without warning, a flash flood tore through the stream bed, drowning everything in its wake. Swept along by the muddy waters, the coelophysis were doomed. But the death of so many would prove a godsend to paleontologists. All segments of the population had been preserved, males and females, juveniles and adults.
Most dinosaurs are only known from 2 or 3 individuals, and because we have hundreds, we have a chance that's extraordinarily rare, exceedingly rare in paleontology, to do biology. It's the same way a modern biologist would measure and compare lots of cats and dogs, lots of lions and tigers to see how they change as they grow up. Well, we can finally do that with a population of dinosaurs with our samples here from Ghost Ranch.
With literally thousands of body parts to choose from, scientists were able to reconstruct a dinosaur that was obviously very dangerous.
Coelophysis was a triple threat in its sensory equipment. It inherited a great sense of smell. The whole muzzle was full of sensory tissue for collecting those little things floating around the atmosphere. The eyes were good too, very like bird eyes. Color-sighted eyes for focusing on prey. The eyeball looked sideways so they could see wide over their periphery. Smell, see, hear, snap.
To enhance its performance, coelophysis also adopted a different body.
This was a new body type. This was a tail longer and more sinuous. These were thighs longer, stronger. This was a set of torso bones more hollowed out than had ever been seen before. This was the world's first roadrunner.
Just outside Denver, Colorado, a dinosaur trackway winds its way up a steep hill. 220 million years ago, a group of coelophysis came this way and left their tracks in the mud. The skeletons at Ghost Ranch have feet that exactly match these prints. Martin Lockley of the University of Colorado has made a career out of tracking dinosaurs.
This whole part of western Colorado is just incredibly rich in dinosaur tracks. All the strata that you see here represents the beginning of the age of dinosaurs. As we move up this slope, we find very little in the way of dinosaur tracks, but at the base of that big cliff, suddenly they become extremely abundant. This was the heyday of coelophysis, if you like, the beginning of the age of dinosaurs. Here we see a beautiful footprint of a coelophysis, and you can follow its step right across here. It's a very narrow trackway. indicating an animal that put one foot in front of another that was extremely erect. And by the length of the step, we can see it was moving at quite a rate.
Its foot was 4 inches long. Its stride, 2.5 feet.
And from that, we can calculate an animal moving at 7 or 8 miles per hour, about twice walking speed. I think all the evidence points to an animal that could really move quite fast.
Coelophysis was built for speed. Its name means hollow-boned, which made it lightweight and agile. Exquisitely constructed, its body was counterbalanced by its tail, allowing it to move upright and pivot, quickly changing course. Long legs meant a longer stride and a faster pace. But how fast could they run?
Body types have their distinctive built-in speeds. Take us humans. You go for a walk, and built into your body is a nice, easy 2 miles per hour. That's when your joints and your ligaments and your tendons all work together in a nice rhythm, binkety, binkety, bink. Dogs, they have a higher walking speed built into their joints. So, a dog cruising at his comfortable speed is binkety, binkety, bink, 3 miles an hour. Go for a walk with your dog. The dog wants to be faster. It's pulling on the leash all the time. 3 miles an hour versus 2. There's another built-in speed. This one's real interesting. Top speed. A human athlete in great shape can do 15 to 20 miles per hour in a sprint. That's 10 times the walking speed. Bing, 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 bing. A dog can sprint at maybe 30, 33, 35 miles an hour. Bing, 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 bing. So why do we care about all of this? Dogs, trotting, people, jogging, why do we care? We care because we have footprints of coelophysis. Hundreds, thousands from this period of time. We can measure the footprints, and then there's a simple formula that tells you how fast the dinosaur was going as it made the footprints. And the average walking speed for coelophysis, North America's first common dinosaur, is 4 miles an hour. Top speed for coelophysis would be 10 times the walking speed. That's 40 miles per hour. That's a good sprint.
Coelophysis could outrun almost anything in its day. For its prey, the nightmare had just begun. It's the twilight of the Triassic and the dawn of the dinosaurs. Ancient reptiles and primitive mammals are leisurely feeding, unaware of what's lurking in the background. Using its remarkable eyesight, a hungry coelophysis spots its prey. After a high-speed chase, it draws blood. Death follows in seconds. Fast, efficient, and ruthless, coelophysis unleashed a new kind of terror on the prehistoric world. Its secret was 2 innovations, which would go largely unchanged for the next 200 million years. The first was an insidious new weapon.
Plunk, plunk. Now, what coelophysis did is to develop special forks on the hand. 3 fingers, thumb the shortest and the strongest, second finger and third finger with claws, extra fingers, no claws at all. Those 3 fingers were designed to close as they flexed, open when they extended, close when they flexed, to grab and hold meat. This apparatus was new to the dinosaurs in the Triassic.
The second innovation was in the jaw. 220 million years before we invented knives and forks, coelophysis had a set of its own.
Now, if you are a coelophysis, you would want to know how to prepare meat. To prepare meat, you have special teeth. You have steak knife teeth, designed sort of like this, but smaller, with a cutting edge along the back. Steak knives are fine for going through the meat, but For cutting slabs of meat more quickly, you need multiple steak knives, and that's exactly what we have here in the Triassic kitchen. The Coelophysis jaws, in fact, up to 20 steak knives all hooked together in the jawbone. So you can go wonka da wonka da wonka da wonka da. But wait, if you order now, there's more. There are upper steak knives, and there are lower steak knives. And there are joints in the skull and the jaw, so the lower steak knives can go backwards, and the upper steak knives can go backwards independently. What do we have here but 2 electric carving knives?
With carving knives for teeth, Coelophysis could devour its prey by ripping it apart. But this new predator relied on more than an arsenal of lethal weapons. It had the stealth and cunning of a modern killer, the wolf. Stalking the Triassic world was not one, but an army of Coelophysis. Like wolves, they worked in teams, each animal intuitively trained to a specific task. Some pursue the prey, while others encircle it, cutting off the route of escape. Finally, they move in for the kill. A pack of hungry Coelophysis would have been a terrifying sight. In a macabre dance of death, they close steadily, one by one, on the prey. With light, agile bodies and deadly claws, their victims didn't stand a chance. Working together, Coelophysis could bring down animals many times their size. Remarkably, the last meals of several Coelophysis have been preserved at Ghost Ranch. Found in their stomachs were fossil remains of reptiles and fish, along with another tantalizing tidbit. Inside the stomach of this creature lie these tiny bones. They belong to a baby Coelophysis. The discovery intrigued Mark Norell of the American Museum of Natural History.
Originally, one of the ideas was that these may be embryos or animals that were developing inside the Coelophysis, that they had live birth. But when the animals were studied more, it was found out that they represented different sizes that were in the inside of the stomach. And also the animals were far too large to have been new hatchlings. In fact, some of them are almost teenager-sized.
The revelation that Coelophysis devoured its kin raises some provocative questions. Was it a cannibal? Or was it crazed by starvation and drought? Either way, the evidence is chilling.
What this tells us was that Coelophysis was perhaps a cannibal, but at least a scavenger, in that it ate some of its own kind. Whether or not they were dead already when it ate them, nobody really knows. But at least it tells us that, in fact, they weren't shy about eating their brothers out there about 220 million years ago.
Streamlined and cold-blooded, Coelophysis was a terrifying miniature version of what was to come. With its innovative jaw, its gashing claw, and its heightened cunning and speed, it had all the makings of a world-class killer. In 100 million years, this tiny creature from the dawn of the dinosaurs would leave its legacy to the largest predators ever to walk the earth. The reigning superstar of the prehistoric world is the giant Brontosaurus. First discovered in the Wild West, no other monster could have been more misunderstood. But now, scientists have put a new face on this ancient beast and dramatically altered its public image. $150 million years ago, North America literally trembled under the weight of a leviathan called Brontosaurus. One of the largest land animals that ever lived, it could arch its neck over a 3-story building. 4 times heavier than an elephant, its legs were as huge as tree trunks. First discovered over 100 years ago, Brontosaurus is one of the most popular dinosaurs in the world, and the most misunderstood. Long depicted as dim-witted, lumbering, and lethargic, Brontosaurs were so big, scientists thought they needed the buoyancy of water to support their massive bodies. And the confusion doesn't stop there. Although they are sauropods, a family of docile plant eaters, almost everything else we know about them is wrong. Even their name. Their scientific name is actually Apatosaurus. One of the first to put the lie to their public image, maverick paleontologist Bob Barker, believes it's time to give Brontosaurus a makeover for the 90s.
Brontosaurus, a Jurassic celebrity, the most famous plant-eating dinosaur. I grew up with it. And there are lots and lots of images of Brontos you can get at the toy store, kind of like this one. It's a certain plastic insouciance. That's a keeper. This is a dead loss. This is really awful. Neck's wrong, head's wrong, body's wrong, claws are wrong, bumps are wrong, tail's wrong. Lose that. This one really, really irritates me because it's more accurate than the others, but this is sold in museum gift shops. It should be even better. The neck should be much, much wider, and the feet are shaped differently here. You've got to unlearn a lot of what you thought you knew about Brontosaurus. And we're going to start with the head, because there's nearly everything wrong with the head, and this one really irritates me. Feel better now.
The head of Brontosaurus has been a bone of contention for the past century. The debate started way back in the days of the Wild West, when Brontosaurus was first discovered. In the 1870s, as work gangs cut the Union Pacific Railroad through the American Midwest, they stumbled upon something unexpected.
Come here!
They found gigantic bones unlike anything they'd seen before. Some as tall as a man. The discovery was made near the town of Laramie, Wyoming, on a rocky outcrop called Como Bluff. One of the richest dinosaur graveyards in the world, it would yield the skeletons of dozens of new species, and bones by the ton. More than enough to build this house, made of fossils, 145 million years old. The skeletons from Como Bluff sparked a frenzy for dinosaurs and launched the Great American Bone Rush. For anyone lucky enough to find an unknown monster and name it, fame and fortune was theirs for the taking. With each new discovery, word spread like wildfire.
Got an urgent message to New York. What do I say?
Back east, America's new museums were desperate to get hold of fossils. The bigger, the better. In 1870, Yale professor O.C. Marsh arrived at Como Bluff, hoping to strike it rich and gain his place in the history books. For 3 years, through freezing winters and blistering summers, his team dug up bones from an area the size of a football field. When Marsh pieced them together, he realized it was a nearly complete skeleton of just one animal. It was also the largest dinosaur yet discovered. He christened it Thundering Lizard, or Brontosaurus. There were 120 bones in all, but a vital piece was missing: its head. As the fossils were being shipped back east, Marsh had a dilemma. Should he reconstruct Brontosaurus without a head, or take a guess? His reputation at stake, he decided to introduce Brontosaurus to the world, head and all. But what head? Conveniently, Marsh had discovered the skull of another sauropod, called Camarasaurus, from a different quarry at Como Bluff. In 1883, at the Peabody Museum at Yale, Marsh unveiled his Brontosaurus for the first time, complete with the head of Camarasaurus. In the rush to be first, mistakes were common. But Marsh's fateful decision would reverberate through the halls of paleontology for the next 100 years. Dinosaurs captured the world's imagination and turned Brontosaurus into an instant celebrity. O.C. Marsh basked in the glory of his famous monster, undaunted by the fact that its skeleton was incomplete, if not incorrect. But something was about to happen that would challenge his reputation. In 1909, near the little town of Jensen, Utah, fossil hunter Earl Douglas was collecting for the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh when he stumbled upon some colossal bones. The partially exposed segments of a dinosaur tail. They were buried just behind this hut where he stored his dynamite. Douglas eventually unearthed not only the most complete Brontosaurus ever found, but, as Scott Madsen explains, this time the dinosaur kept its head.
Of course, when Douglas was here, this rock outcrop actually stood about 50 feet higher than where I'm standing today. Those vertebrae were sitting at the top of that outcrop, and the rest of the tail would have extended down behind me about 30 or 40 feet, while the rest of the body was stretched out in this direction to somewhere in here where they found the skull attached to the skeleton.
The skull Douglas found was long and slender, unlike the Camarasaurus skull Marsh had mounted on his Brontosaurus, which was bigger and snub-nosed. When word of the discovery leaked out, scientists dared the Carnegie Museum to exhibit it. In the paleo world of the turn of the century, O.C. Marsh's lofty reputation still carried weight. Under pressure, the museum didn't mount the Douglas skull on its skeleton. For the next 40 years, Brontosaurus appeared in public with the same skull Marsh had touted at Yale, until dinosaur expert Jack McIntosh decided something was wrong.
When I first saw this head as a kid, it looked fine. But as I studied these animals more carefully, it became clear that this large, snub-nosed skull was not the proper one for this animal.
McIntosh's doubts were based on his intimate knowledge of another dinosaur called Diplodocus, a giant with a long, slender snout. Convinced that Brontosaurus looked more like Diplodocus than Camarasaurus, he set about solving the dilemma by delving into Douglas's original journals.
I'm glad to announce that we have found dinosaur skulls. The skull seems pretty large to me, about 26 inches in length. The skull was found with the skeleton.
In search of this skull, McIntosh headed deep into the bowels of the Carnegie Museum, where fossils not on display are stored. his chances looked slim. Tucked away in drawers, deep recesses, and murky corners are the remains of countless dinosaurs that ruled the prehistoric world, some still lying in state. Big bones are stored on shelves, labeled according to when and where they were found. McIntosh was looking for any sign of Douglas's 1909 expedition. At the back of the bone room, he finally found what he was searching for.
This was the defining moment. It was clear that this was Douglas's skull, without the lower jaw, the right size, the long tapered snout, without the bulldog-like short one of the camarasaur-like skulls that Marsh had assigned to this animal.
In 1975, for the first time in its history, Jack McIntosh reunited Brontosaurus' skeleton with its true head.
That's fine. That's great.
While museum curators and book publishers around the world scrambled to find a new head, all Jack had to do was to return the old one to the tomb of unclaimed bones. But the dinosaur's new profile was just the beginning. Its discovery would unleash a landslide of new revelations about Brontosaurus that would continue to change its celebrated image. Earl Douglas found his famous Brontosaurus near here, the border of Colorado and Utah. In 1915, this tranquil river valley and its prolific horde of dinosaurs became the legacy of a dedicated fossil hunter. Today, Dinosaur National Monument is a window on the past. Here, 150 million years ago, countless dinosaurs met their death. High up on a 60-foot rock face, paleontologist Scott Madsen is exposing part of a huge wall where their remains have been preserved. So far, 400 dinosaur specimens and 20 mountable skeletons have been uncovered, including Brontosaurus. But even this find throws up as many puzzles as answers.
This assemblage of bone here is basically a tremendous jigsaw puzzle. Sometimes it's really difficult to tell what animal they belong to. Other times, you can take a single bone and line it up with another bone in a complete skeleton, and immediately you see an exact match.
Every bone tells a story. The way an animal is constructed reveals how it lived and moved, how it fed, and what it ate. A simple error can lead to a mountain of misinformation. The old Brontosaurus was depicted as a tall, upright creature towering over the treetops, feeding on tender leaves, much like giraffes do today. But now, in museums around the world, the image of Brontosaurus is undergoing a major makeover. Kent Stevens of the University of Oregon doesn't dig up bones like most paleontologists. He explores the world of dinosaurs with state-of-the-art technology. Using 3D computer animation, Stevens has demolished the theory of Brontosaurus as a lofty beast.
I think we'd all like to imagine this majestic beast was walking along with his head held proudly high like this, munching off the trees, and maybe if it was underwater, still keeping its head above the water. Here's a different sauropod. This is same animal, two radically different views on how much its neck could move.
The old Brontosaurus had a shorter neck. The new version is longer, which limits how high the animal could carry its head. To calculate its range of motion, Stevens has reconstructed the neck of a Brontosaurus, bone by bone.
Well, the way I've been going about trying to do it is to use the computer as a means for modeling the geometry, modeling the exact shape of individual bones, and then putting them together, and then letting the shape of the bones limit the movement on a joint-by-joint basis.
To get the proper shape, every neck bone had to be accurately measured. Based on the measurements, a computer program called Dinomorph created a working model and tested it in an arching pose.
If you put the Dinomorph model into that pose, if you really try to do a replica of this real tall stance, you end up, in fact, breaking the neck in quite a few places.
If Brontosaurus couldn't reach the treetops to feed, how and what did it eat?
Well, why don't we imagine this popcorn as some tasty truffles and scattered about the Jurassic underbrush. And let's imagine this vacuum cleaner as the neck of the Brontosaurus. Probably swept along in a sort of a gentle arc back and forth, picking up what it could, stepping forward from time to time. Sort of a motion like this. So, in conclusion, the Brontosaurus was probably feeding off of relatively low vegetation and nowhere near as high a vegetation as we were led to believe.
Far from a heady life in the trees, Brontosaurus was living off the land. But its head now seems far too small to consume the amount of food needed to sustain its massive body. Unless a vital piece of information is missing. Intrigued by the problem, Bob Barker decided to pay a new visit to an old friend.
Alas, poor Brontosaur. I knew him well, Horatio. Well, that is my favorite plant-eating dinosaur, my favorite vegisaur, my favorite dinosaur face, but it's a face full of problems. You can see where the eye goes, the ear, well, maybe the tongue. But what about the face? What about the expression? What about the lips? From this skull, you don't know anything about Bronto lips. You don't know whether you could be slurped by a Bronto. But we have a new skull, and it answers that question, the questions about Brontosaurian lips.
In 1995, a team of excavators led by Bob Barker returned to Como Bluff in Wyoming, where O.C. Marsh first discovered Brontosaurus. At a site called Nail Quarry, the remains of giant dinosaurs are not unusual. But what they uncovered was a complete skull of a Brontosaurus, including, for the first time, the lower jaw. This skull led Barker to question his own preconceptions about how Brontosaurus looked.
If you want to know about Bronto faces, and I do, you've got to start with the T-Rex, because it has primitive lips. It has what I call a garbo smile, thin, curved, and carnivorous. And we know that because of the lip holes in the skull. You've got a primitive dinosaur face, and there's a row of holes, bing, 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 meaning a row of nerves and a thin lip, like that, like a lizard, and that's the way I've always drawn Brontosaurus, with thin lizard lips. There's another possibility, really absurd, that Brontos had moose lips. I didn't believe that, no one did, and we were all wrong.
Barker rarely admits he's wrong, but some features of the new skull changed his mind. Looking at it for the first time reminded him of a moose.
Consider the moose. Huge muscular lips for grabbing plants, and a gigantic hole here for one huge nerve going to the lips. Did Brontosaurus have a similar lip apparatus? Yes, it did. How do we know? The new skull, the first complete skull and lower jaws ever found for Brontosaurus, right here. Complete lower jaw with teeth. Eardrum would be here. Eye socket there. The face. And right on the face is a gigantic hole for the lip nerve and artery. This hole is twice the size of the hole from a moose. Coming out of this hole was a gigantic nerve and artery supplying a super gigantic set of moose lips. And we now can reconstruct correctly the Bronto face. Skull. Muscles and nerves. Eyeball. Eardrum. The nerves for the lip. And the face. For the first time we see the real Brontosaurus face. With lips like this, it could pull off twigs. With lips like this, it could pick up nuts. With lips like this, it could slurp its young to reassure it. Brontosaurus had a magnificent, expressive, highly adaptive face with the biggest set of lips in all the Dinosauria.
The front of Brontosaurus is not all that's been revamped. Its rear has also taken a beating. For a long time, Brontosaurus was portrayed as the consummate tail dragger, a dinosaur so huge he could barely keep his backside off the ground. Later versions showed Brontosaurus horizontally balanced between his head and his tail. But Brian Curtis of State University of New York is still not sure that it's right.
When I first saw this Brontosaurus toy, I said, ridiculous. There's no way Brontosaurus could hike up on its hind legs. But as I began to study the anatomy of this animal, I realized, yes, he could.
What Curtis saw in Brontosaurus was that its hind legs are larger and longer than its forelimbs. In fact, the back half of its body is 30% larger than its front. Brontosaurus also sported the world's largest pelvis.
This pelvis was so huge because of the amazing amounts of muscles attaching to it. This is evidenced by the tall spines and the huge muscles that ran across the top of this animal's tail, and an equally large muscles that ran across the bottom of this animal's tail. These muscles converged on the pelvis and were anchored there, and when activated would pull Brontosaurus up onto his hind legs, with the tail then touching the ground, acting as a third limb.
So, Brontosaurus could reach the treetops after all, but not by arching its neck. Instead, it stood on its hind legs, using its tail for support. The proof rests in the size of its large, triangular-shaped tailbones.
This large hole in the center is for the arteries and veins and nerves to run through. The size of this hole and the size of these bones indicate the tail was immense.
The shape of these bones was long thought to be unique to dinosaurs, but similar bones are still around today.
Come on, boys. Come on out. Kangaroos use their tail as a third leg, just like Brontosaurus. Kangaroos have large pelvis, just like Brontosaurus. And kangaroos have chevron bones, just like Brontosaurus. Kangaroos can get up on their hind legs and get 5 feet in the air. Imagine how amazing Brontosaurus would have been, 35 feet in the air.
But unlike kangaroos, Brontosaurus packed a secret weapon. The massive muscles that heaved it up on its hind legs also allowed Brontosaurus to crack its tail like a whip. The last 40 tail bones are only 6 inches long. Linking them by a ball-and-ball attachment gives the tail its remarkable flexibility. A whip was a useful weapon when warding off a pack of hungry predators.
Imagine this whip is the last 15 feet of the tail of Brontosaurus. The lack of broken bones in the tails that we find suggests the tail was not impacting its enemies. But what it could have done is this. Creating thunderous cracks, the tip of the tail exceeding 720 miles an hour, enough to scare any enemy away.
From tail dragger to whip cracker, earth shaker to acrobat, Brontosaurus has undergone the greatest facelift in dinosaur history. Now, more than ever, the giant of giants deserves its celebrity status.